Tom, tell us, you've been in the exchange business now for what, 30 years, and you've been centered around the energy business. Seen rather a lot of change during that time.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. And actually, it's been a little bit longer than 30 years, but 30 sounds better than 40. So, yeah, the world I'm in today is significantly different from the world I entered as a young boy on Wall Street as a write-up clerk and a phone clerk, and the land of paper and pencils that still had erasers where you could make changes on your trading cards. But yeah, it's quite dramatic, but it's a market that never stops evolving. And I think this year is really significant, obviously coming out of COVID, but we've seen an extreme interest, where we had sort of these parallel universes for the last few years around digital and crypto living one life and traditional markets architecture living another, not necessarily thinking ever the twain shall meet, but I think we're seeing a confluence across this year, and especially with some meetings coming up with the CFTC later this month. It's going to be really interesting. Great opportunities.
It's fascinating, is this whole FTX proposal. Obviously, you and I, we bumped into each other most recently in Boca Raton in Florida for the FIA conference just a month or so ago. And certainly it was interesting there, wasn't it, how suddenly we seem to have had an almost crypto domination of the event, or at least a blockchain crypto domination of the event.
I think probably the acceptance really began, I think, with ICE. When ICE set up back, and they did it very strategically, set up this isolated entity, call it a warehouse, interconnected it to the clearing system, but held it fairly at arm's length until they really got some comfort with it. And now with Gensler allowing for the futurized version of Bitcoin, and now you're seeing an ETF grow on the back of a futurized version of Bitcoin versus a spot version of Bitcoin. And you're seeing this slow crossover. But at the same time, you're seeing a generational shift of investors that are not reticent to be digital first and traditional markets second, where up till probably 2 or 3 years ago, really, it was completely inverse. So I think that's a significant difference in the year ahead.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to energizing new markets, it's very interesting. I don't know. I thought Boca this year felt a little bit like maybe 2000 or 2001, where suddenly all of these technology-based people had taken over and the old open outcry floors seemed to be suddenly looking like dinosaurs. And then, of course, within 5 years, all those guys had pretty much all disappeared or been embalmed and joined into the whole legacy exchange network. I'm wondering what you thought about whether you think it looked a bit like that this year.
I'm not looking too embalmed, and I'm part of that transition. So thank God. But you're right. It was the first concept of electronification really rose with the NASDAQ market, that whole 9801, and then it disappeared. But the concept was already there, and the ability to take electronic market data directly from a floor upstairs and trade in parallel with the markets. And obviously, we saw that transition. Other than the LME, it's been completed. It's done its entirety. But I think it was interesting seeing FTX and Coinbase, where Coinbase was something radical and out of the box just 24 months ago. It's really sort of mainstream. It was FTX that really pushed the boundaries. And the concept is, I think, really doable. It's actually something I've been personally looking at. Going back almost 4 or 5 years ago, I wrote the first ideas around a blockchain-based clearing architecture and disintermediation and all the buzzwords, but it was really about scale. And FTX, I think, is the first one that really can bring scale. And that's the significant difference. It's a challenger, but a challenger with a logic around it. And acceptance.
Challenger with a logic around it. Yes, I like that a great deal. And I think it's true. I mean, what interests me is how we're probably going to see the legacy exchange world working to try and cannibalize what's already come through the system from the new guys. Because certainly we saw that in 2001, 2005. There was this incredible amount of upswing.
Yeah, and I think also the transition now is, if you look at the rise of the electronification of the main exchanges, where NYMEX had its own system called Access and CME, Globex, but they were proprietary in nature. Access is gone and Globex is the dominant one, and then you have ICE and its tech platforms, but they're still silos. They're still fairly well controlled, whereas this new world is doing exactly what it's saying. It doesn't have boundaries. It has rules in theory, and more rules will be imposed on it, but it's not a vertical, it's a lateral, I guess is the better way to put it. So market access, data dissemination, fee structuring, and it's a honing process. There's no doubt. There's inefficiencies and efficiencies in both markets, and sometimes the inefficiencies are the ones that drive a lot of value. I think data clearly is stated that. I mean, the revenue tails on the back of ICE they're in excess of 50% of their yearly revenue is data driven, where an exchange was about execution previously. It's not. So now you have this new digital market architecture that's breaking that barrier down about data. Yes, it's proprietary in that it's generating it, but its interoperability and portability of the data again, I'm calling it lateral versus the verticals. And I think that's a significant shift that we're seeing.